People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ12. Terms and conditions apply.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello out there in Archaeology Podcast land. This is Dr. Alan Garfinkel. I'm the president and founder of the California Rock Art Foundation. And what we do is we identify, evaluate, manage, and conserve rock art both in Alta California and in Baja California. We conduct field trips, we have trainings, exercise, we do research, and in every way possible, we try to preserve, protect, and coordinate treasures of Alta and Baja California rock art, of which there are many and diverse. We also work closely with Native Americans and partner with them to recognize and protect sacred sites. So for more info about the fabulous California Rock Art Foundation, you can go to carockart.org. Also, I'm open to give me a call, 805-312-2261. We would welcome sponsorship or underwriting, helping us to defray the costs of our podcasts, and also membership in California Rock Art Foundation. And of course, donations, since we are a 501c3 nonprofit scientific and educational corporation. God bless everyone out there in podcast land.
You're listening to the Rock Art Podcast. Join us every week for fascinating tales of rock art, adventure, and archaeology. Find our contact info in the show notes and send us your suggestions.
Welcome out there in Archaeological Podcast land. This is your host, Dr. Alan Garfinkel, for your Rock Art Podcast. This is episode 130, and we're bringing back one of our favorite guests. This is our scholar from Mesoamerica, from Mexico, Guanajuato University, Tirtha Mukhopadhyay, who I'm proud of, and blessed to call my friend and colleague. Tirtha, are you there?
Yes, Alan, thank you very much for introducing me once again. And it's always a pleasure and honor to be here and talking to you.
And you're speaking from where?
I'm speaking from the state of Guanajuato. This is south central Mexico, and just on the lap of the south central mountains of Mexico, which kind of runs towards the east from the Sierra Madre Occidental.
Well, for those that have never heard you, which is possible, give them a 1 or 2 minute intro to our ongoing collaboration and association and your fascination with similar subjects relating to indigenous cosmology, rock art, and cultural materials.
Yes, Alan, thank you very much for asking me to talk on this relationship that has grown over the years and on the lines of common interests. I have been interested in cultural anthropology and especially rock art, as my background is, as you know, is in aesthetics, hermeneutics of art, and also cognitive behaviors in relation to artistic expressions. So that has been my background of studies. And so I became interested in rock art, especially in the COSOs, when I got an invitation for a Fulbright Senior Research Fellowship at the University of Santa Cruz. That was in 2013. And so then I got acquainted with you, and then we have grown this friendship, and we have dedicated good deal of her time to the study of the rock arts of the Cosos, the symbolism, and while you were creating this enormous database of information on the Coso rock arts and the rock arts of the Mojave and adjacent areas in the American Southwest, I was looking at the images per se and trying to deconstruct the meaning and trying to relate that meaning to the belief systems of these peoples in the American Southwest and Mesoamerica, where I now live and work at the University of Guanajuato. So I guess today, as we had been chatting a little while ago, we would like to talk on, again, this symbolism of the gamekeepers, on the rock arts of the Cosos, and those affiliated tribes of the Uto-Aztecan language spectrum.
Yeah, let's give our listeners a little thumbnail in the sense that many of you may be aware, talking about our listenership, that Tirtha and I just published a book, a 70,000-word book by Bergen Publications on the iconicity of the Uto-Aztecans. And I know I've spoken about that, and Tirtha has as well. But on an additional matter, another book has come out in which I have a chapter, and that book is edited by Richard or Rick Chacon, and it's on a study worldwide of what's called the Supernatural Gamekeeper. And that is actually a good terminology, even calling that same individual or an analog for it some sort of an Earth Mother or Earth Father, and even in sometimes a lunar or solar god and goddess. There's a bit of a package there in terms of symbolism and also in terms of the cognitive map of the universe that the indigenous people have. Would you agree, Tirtha?
Yes, of course. What this means is that as we tend to use the metaphor of the gamekeeper, we are actually talking about a hunter-gatherer context. And the 90% of human prehistory, or if you look at the meta-historical spectrum, we have been hunter-gatherers mostly, and agricultural settlements wouldn't date from before the Middle Pleistocene or the Paleolithic, I guess.
The reason that I was asked to be in that book, that Supernatural Gamekeeper book, and this has been something I've spoken about before,
right,
on this Rock Art podcast, is there's a unique example, which is somewhat rare, not unique alone, but extremely rare even worldwide, that there is a panel, a rock art panel, a pictograph in the Tehachapi Mountains in the homeland of the Kawayasu Indians that is called Yahuera Kanina, which means home of Yahuera. And Yahuera is a supernatural gamekeeper. And so they have an actual term in their own language for that place. But further than that, they have a very robust theology that's been ethnographically documented and even documented historically, within the last several years through the Kawayasu Language and Cultural Center, that tells us all the details surrounding this picture and how what the Kawayasu believed and what the function of the images are and what the actual nature of this particular place was in terms of the indigenous cosmology. And so even in this worldwide book, where we have people, chiming in from the Altai, from Torres Strait, from certainly Mexico and the South America, et cetera, it is quite rare for anthropologists and the native peoples themselves in some instance to share this knowledge, which of course is is rather secret and rather important and rather spiritually endowed, to identify exactly how a picture on stone relates to all of these matters that we're talking about, including things like hunting magic, which I know we don't like that term, something like increased rights, or the resurrection and transmogrification of the spirit animals, allowing them to be rebirthed and transformed and enter back into the terrestrial world, and also that this deity needs to be connected with spiritually, and the animals must be hunted in a very reverent way, in a sacrificial way. And when they are hunted, one must also provide the reference and the cognition that they would have to be thankful to this particular god or goddess, and also perform certain key ceremonies so that they could be allowed to hunt again. And if that wasn't the case, then in the future, hunting would be difficult to impossible, and they would be unable to acquire the needed nourishment for their people. Am I somehow explaining all that?
Yes, of course. I mean, this is crucial to our contemporary studies of the sacred symbolism of these cultures. Part of the reticence, the unwillingness to talk about any sacred symbol or icon, lies in the fact that the discourse of the sacred, or the semiotics of the sacred that these cultures possess or continue to nurture and respect and practice in some ways or the other, would be invaded by foreign or external methods of interpretation, even ethnography or ethnology. If you look back at the origins of ethnographic studies in Europe in the 19th century, and the way ethnologists or ethnographers were approaching and trying to interpret these cultures, they
had a very prejudiced way of looking at them.
I wouldn't call it I wouldn't ascribe a value judgment to that. I would say that it's their own way of, it's a more scientific.
It was a Western way, a Cartesian way. How's that?
Yeah, exactly.
And this was something that I think in some ways ultimately offended indigenous people. Am I correct or wrong?
Yes, of course. They were trying to preserve that archetype which they had respected and for which they had the sense of belonging for generations, for eons of history, of time.
The other thing that has occurred that in my current effort, 4-year effort that I'm trying to put out, is that much of a literature on such deities was very androcentric, very male oriented,
very gender specific.
Let's talk about that for a minute. What do we mean by that?
I'd love to talk about that. I mean, this is the distinction that we were talking about, the etic and the emic, and how about looking at it from inside and looking at the gender issues. Well, what I wanted to just rehash for today while talking about the gamekeeper symbolism is the fact that before I jump on to the gender question, I would love to, articulate some of the ideas very briefly that I have about the gamekeeper. And this is that the gamekeeper is a layer of human evolution. It's important, indispensable, that the starting point for any inquiry into these deities, like the gamekeeper, the Yawera, Kanina, it comes from a process which we can call representational minuscularity. In fact, even as far back as, when I was studying for my doctoral research, I tended to fall back on this idea of the visual scarcity in the availability of the visual cues that were giving us a message in these archetypal visual symbols. Like, it's a miniaturized form, it's an impression of a human shape. It does not have a very realistic depictive rule of engagement. What we have instead is an anthropomorph and an impression of something like a human being. And it's a miniature. It's contained. The features have been co-opted subjectively by the artist in the proportion of the lengths of arms, legs, the head to its body, the dimensions of the torso, the adjuncts to the body like the eyes, ears, the mouths, the horns. Sometimes they have antennas. It seems that though the deity has a human resemblance, there are differences in the actual appearance of these adjunct forms, but they are meant to draw or call your attention. The gender is also part of this interesting game that the ritual artist is playing. So this level of curiosity, attention, power of the gaze of the gamekeeper is looking at us with a single eye or a concentric shaped head. It has a miniaturized body, and it also looks like this gamekeeper looks like a shepherd or like a pastor, a keeper of animals.
Let's stop there. Let's pick this up on the next segment, because you're talking about some rather important aspects of trying to understand the imagery of these figures. See you in the flip-flop, gang. Welcome back, gang. We have Tirtha Mukhopadhyay, our doctor who teaches at the Guanajuato University, and this is segment 2 of our Rock Art podcast. And before the break, we were talking about the attributes and the figurative elements of these supernatural and supramundane beings. Tirtha, let's go from there.
Yes. So even if we try to explain the meaning of these symbols from an external ethnographic point of observation, we notice that the basic function of this gamekeeper symbol is sustenance. It's a provider figure. It's keeping, and the animals are all playing around it, and it's all the animals. The presence of animals is so interesting. That's another aspect of these universal prototypes, because what role do the animals play in the theater of the gamekeeper? That's the question. So they emote emotionally. They connect the viewer, with the idea of security, promise, abundance, the playfulness of life. If you look at the Yawera, so they have the message is clear. It's the affect. The affect is very important in such symbols, and this question of affect that this god-like figure, this what the indigenous groups call the bonga, the Aztecs call them their deities, the gods and goddesses of the Aztecs. Teotl, the word that signifies or refers to deities, all these godlike figures, because there is an emotional question involved here, but that they are protecting you, they are our protectors. The gender question is very important, because in nature, gender is a cultural construct, but gender roles are also biologically intertwined or entangled with questions of, physiological bodily functions and behavior. although those roles, those predetermined biological roles are changing with the interventions of modern science. Traditionally, the kind of affect that's represented in these images would always assure the viewer, would assure the participant of that culture, who's an emic participant, like looking at the culture from inside and believing in the real presence of such impressions, such psychological moments. The affect, the connecting affect would be very important for them. So a female figure who takes care of her children, if we extend that metaphor to believe in the motherly aspect of the relationship, the Mother Earth symbol, for example, and it's also a power wielding entity, someone who has control over your life and who is protecting you. And this message is very important. And I think the success of the archetypal rock art lies in the ability to communicate that message for us. And it is this message that actually fascinates us even to this day when we stand in front of, like the Koso animal masters. And the gender question, like a protecting father or a protecting mother, god or goddess, there is gender ambiguity in certain instances. And these questions are also very closely connected, I believe, to the nature of the dream.
Yes, absolutely. One thing that you just mentioned about gender ambiguity, I know from the Aztec, the Nahua cultures, that gender ambiguity was embraced, and that in much of the way they thought about things was this, oppositional forces, or the plus and minus that were available simultaneously. It wasn't seen as difficult to embrace a dichotomous example of both a male and female figure in one.
Yes.
When the Kawayasu talked about this Yahwera figure, this supernatural guardian, the ethnographers and the people, the Kawayasu themselves, say that the women recognized and saw this figure as a man, and the men recognized and saw this figure as a woman.
Wow.
And that this was, they would enter into this connection, I believe in times, in a dream. I think the dream world was something they would embrace as well, and be able to see and connect with such figures in their dreams. And that appears to be common. Certainly the dream time worldwide seems to be the envelope, the conduit, the portal to the world of the supernatural, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, how far can we go back in time, or should we not go back in time to understand this phenomenon of dreams, the oneirological image? Because especially the rock arts, and even if you consider the representation of the deities, polytheomorphic religious deities, the gods and goddesses with 10 arms, 100 arms, sometimes of ambiguous gender, as in the Buddhist representations of the bodhisattvas, those spiritual beings who have been coming for the edification of people in different periods of time. They have ambiguous gender, for example, but they are part of a dream continuum, and the physically, visually, the image resembles the experience of that image is very similar to the experience of a human being whom you might have known in real life, but as you would see him or her in a dream. When we have dreams of our parents, of those who have departed, those who have, or our maybe even our grandparents, our great grandparents. I mean, they might come back to us in a dream.
Let's pick this up on the next segment. See you in the flip flop, gang. Welcome back, gang. You're at the Rock Art Podcast, episode 130 with Tirtha Mukhopadhyay from Guanajuato, Mexico. Hi, Tirtha.
Hi, Alan.
So let's pick it up where we left it off. Please go right ahead.
Yeah, sure. So actually came up to a very interesting juncture where we were really trying to correlate the characteristics of the rock art images, the anthropomorphs, the animal figures, the visual adjuncts, all those semiotic elements on the panel. And we were trying to correlate those characteristics or features to the experience of the dream, the oniric experience, in other words. And what is evident here is the similarity of the rock art image, which is like a floating, numinous anthropomorph, with those bird-like feet, giving us an impression of appearing, the momentariness of that image.
And you're exactly right about all that in terms of some of the analogs that we've seen, even with Mesoamerica. When you look at Coatlicue,
yes,
which is the skirt snake figure,
yes,
one of the key goddesses. Her legs have the talons of a bird. There's feathers at her legs, and then of course she's either birthing a snake or connected to the earth with some sort of a snake-like tether, and then she's covered with skulls and snakes
and feathers,
which of course shows us that binary opposition of both life and death.
Yes, it's like, yes, it's the numinous, it's the plumed serpent, right? So it has wings and it is bird-like features, but it's a snake at the same time. So it's combining all those characteristics. And so the image has really the gamekeeper, animal masters, anthropomorphs, they have a dreamlike quality. And the significance of this is, I guess, we cannot claim any kind of, absolute truth or verity about the claim. But what this reminds us of, in fact, is that from this perspective of the storytellers, because the ancient peoples, or the people who communicate by means of rock art, they are storytellers. And they create dream images for us. So the dream archetype is essentially a semblance. It's like a film. It's like a theater of characters that we have actually seen or experienced. Hence, an image such as a dream enables a transition, through planes, from reality to dream, and from dream to reality. So it's like passing through a membrane of experience, a membrane of characters who live on the other side, and are far away from us, who are full-bodied, and they are like, I remember Shakespeare saying stuffs that dreams are made of. So they resemble those dreamlike characteristics. And this is because the dream connects us to the numinous experience, the numinous image. And what we have, therefore, with the gamekeeper is the experience of a dream in which a human-like figure appears and is connected, reveals to us his or her connections to the creatures of Mother Nature. And this is a very important kind of assurance for anybody, for the hunter who has to perform these specific rituals before he goes on a hunting trip or project, and who has to apologize for harming those animals, for killing those animals, yet receiving them with the blessings of these spirit keepers, these animal masters. So all those emotions, I believe, are involved in the archetype of the gamekeeper. And it's what seemed to fascinate me is that it's not just in the American Southwest. And I just started, compiling a literature on cultural anthropological research on the connections of animal masters, gamekeepers images in the Southwest, in the Cosos, in Mesoamerica, in the Aztec religions, in the various expressions of the Mixteca. And if you look at Codex Borgia or some of the other codices, this god called Mixcoatl, Mixcoatl is the god of hunting. And the defining elements of this god in the codices, as Mixcoatl is represented in the codices, are very similar to the Yawera. He has some kind of staff, or an atlatl, or arrows, or a spear-like hunting tool, or an obsidian. The addition of the very region-specific reference, the obsidian. Then there is this. He wears an animal skin, much like the textiles, with patterns on it, which resembles the textile patterns on the Southwest anthropological cultural identity groups. So the Mixcoatl is a brother of Tezcatlipoca, is also a brother of Quetzalcoatl. They are three brothers. And so this entire myth, the story of the hunter god, of the god of hunting, is very much intrinsic to the Aztecs. It is very much intrinsic to the Asian religions. And, even as they are practiced today, the Chinese pantheon, the Indian religious pantheons will have these gods and goddesses which bear hunting tools and arms, and they kill animals, or they ride on the animals, and they can change shapes. The changing of shapes is a very important dream quality that these images have.
Yeah, there's a lot here to sort of reflect upon and get insights and wisdom regarding these particular figures. One of the problems I'm dealing with in this upcoming book of mine is this class of figures, this decorated animal-human figures, which are, very similar to Yahwera. Yahwera and the Kawasu ethnography was a key for me to understand these decorated animal-human figures that are ubiquitous in the Cosos. There's, I don't know, let's say 700 to 1,000 of them there. And we can date them. We can actually date them because we can date them in a variety of ways, and they're very, very ancient. They go back to this period even earlier than the Newberry, known as the Little Lake period, associated with Pinto-style projectile points. And that is in the range of, what would I call it, maybe 5, 6, 7, or 8,000 years old. And we know this because of dating of these images through portable XRF, X-ray fluorescence, and because of other ways to access information, including their superimposition.
Yeah, would you say that the projectile points, and we have a chapter on the projectile points from Nevada, right? And would you say that these hunting tools they are the hunting tools themselves. Again, they resemble some kind of, some numinous or deific.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Something that stuck in my craw for the longest time, and I could not understand it. I said, here are these figures that appear to be supramundane, figures that are deities, and a large number of them are obviously women. They have, the gendered elements of anatomically women. Why, if they're women and they're these supramundane figures, would they be associated with male hunting equipment? And it just was such a paradox for me. But when you pierce the veil and study the information, ethnographic information across the globe, and then especially looking at the American Southwest and high cultures of Mexico, they show female figures anatomically with these weapons of war and weapons of fighting, because they are perceived in part as sort of weapons that are of creation. When when the men brought in and slayed a game animal, it was like they were birthing or bringing in, the nourishment to create life. And so it was a life creation metaphor as well as a death dealing weapon. Does that make any sense?
Yes, exactly. And that's possible in a dreamlike state. You can interchange those symbolic elements to mean something else. And there is complete transparency. There is complete freedom because in the dream world, you do not really have these impediments of objectivity, the impediments of identity and fixity. There is the special privilege of the ability to transform and for the object itself to transform, so we can look at it in multiple ways. I mean, the mother who gives birth, who is a sustainer, also ensures death at the same time. The mother can kill, these images of the tantric gods and goddesses, which probably have their origins in central India, and which have been further, been developed in various ways in complex iconographic representations in Tibet, in the tantric traditions of Tibet and Buddhist tantric traditions.
So you're saying that even though the gender is female, they're sort of the dealers or providers of life and death, because they have it in their power to both create and destroy. Am I right?
Yes, they are destroying and they are renewing as well. So that is exactly what happens in nature, because one generation is decimated, and it's buried in the earth, but it gives rise to like crops, harvest, and life, and it's part of the cycle of life and death.
Right.
So this is very, very important and very interesting, and
So if we were going to put sort of a bow on this and say something to our listeners, what's the takeaway? What's the most important element of the discussion that we've been providing about these beings that may be both men and women, that are protectors, but yet death dealers, creatives, and etc.? What should they understand in terms of the theology of the indigenous and the relationships of their cultural material, their descriptors that we see in rock art and in the statuary, etc.? What is the key takeaway that helps them understand or appreciate and explain some of this?
Well, I would like to bring in on an interdisciplinary perspective to the answer to this question, just because it is so close to what I have been doing for a long time, studying iconography from a philosophical, theological perspective. And I think one of the takeaways, I mean, even if you are considering this question from a positivist view, and it retains its value, its universal character, and it is this, that there is ultimately a very subjective, personal experience in any event involving your encounter with a supernatural gamekeeper. There's a personal element involved in that experience, and that personal experience resembles in many ways a dream experience.
Okay, I think with that we're going to have to close very closely. So
Okay.
let's put a bow on it and say goodbye to our listeners and tell them we'll see them on the flip-flop.
Sure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Rock Art Podcast with Dr. Alan Garfinkel and Chris Webster. Find show notes and contact information at www.arcpodnet.com/rockart. Thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing this podcast with your family and friends. This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Rachel Roden.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.